August 25th, 1959. Tuesday night, Birdland Jazz Club, Broadway and 52nd Street, New York City. Miles Davis was taking a break between sets. He'd already played one incredible set that night, and the crowd was electric. Everyone who was anyone in jazz came to Birdland. It was the most famous jazz club in the world. Miles stepped outside to get some air. It was hot inside the club, packed with people, and he needed a moment before going back on stage. A white woman, a friend who'd been at the show, was trying to get a taxi. It was late. Taxis were scarce, and she was having trouble. Miles, being a gentleman, stepped to the curb to help her flag one down. Above Miles's head, in huge letters, the Birdland marquee read, Miles Davis Sextet. His name, in lights, right there above where he was standing. A police officer approached, white, mid-30s, nightstick on his belt. "Hey you, move along." Miles looked at him. "Excuse me?" I said, "Move along. No loitering." "I'm not loitering," Miles said calmly. "I'm working here. I'm helping this lady get a taxi, and then I'm going back inside to finish my set." The officer looked at him like he was lying. "You work here?" "Yes, I work here. My name is on the marquee right above your head." The officer didn't look up. "I don't care what your name is. Move along or I'll arrest you." Miles pointed up at the marquee. "Look up. That's my name. Miles Davis. I'm the headliner. I'm taking a break between sets." The officer's face hardened. "I told you to move. Now move." This is where Miles Davis made a choice. He could have just walked away, could have gone back inside without saying another word, could have let it go. But Miles Davis had spent his entire life being told where he could and couldn't stand, being told to use the back entrance, being told he didn't belong, being treated like he was invisible, or, worse, criminal, just for existing, while black. And he was tired. "I'm not moving," Miles said. "I work here. This is my place of employment. You have no right to tell me to leave." The officer grabbed Miles's arm. Miles pulled his arm away. "Don't touch me." That's when the officer pulled out his nightstick. What happened next occurred in seconds, but would change how America saw jazz musicians forever. The officer swung his nightstick at Miles's head. Miles tried to block it, but the stick caught him above the eye, splitting the skin. Blood immediately started pouring down his face. Miles stumbled backward, hands up, trying to protect himself. The officer hit him again and again. I said, "Move." Another officer arrived, saw Miles, a black man, bleeding, with a white officer standing over him with a nightstick, and assumed Miles was the aggressor. The second officer grabbed Miles from behind, forcing his arms behind his back. Miles tried to explain, "I work here. My name is on the sign. I'm the performer." Nobody was listening. They threw Miles against a police car, face first, into the hood. Blood from the gash above his eyes spreading across the metal. People were coming out of Birdland now, seeing their headliner, the greatest jazz musician alive, being beaten and arrested on the street, directly in front of the club where his name was literally displayed in lights 15 feet above where it was happening. Someone ran to get Miles's manager. Someone else ran to call his lawyer. People were shouting, "That's Miles Davis. He works here. What are you doing?" The officers weren't interested in hearing it. They handcuffed Miles, threw him in the back of the police car, and drove away. Miles sat in the back of that police car, blood still pouring from his head, hands cuffed behind his back. And he wasn't thinking about the pain. He was thinking about something else entirely. He was thinking about how, In America in 1959, a black man could be the most famous jazz musician in the world, could have his name in lights on the most famous jazz club in the world, could be standing directly beneath that sign, and still be assumed to be a criminal who needed to be beaten and removed. At the police station, they charged Miles with assault and disorderly conduct. Assault. They'd beaten him with a nightstick, and they were charging him with assault. Miles asked to make a phone call. He asked for medical attention for the gash on his head, which was still bleeding. They told him to wait. He sat in that cell, blood drying on his face, and something hardened inside him. By morning, the story was everywhere. Miles Davis arrested outside Birdland, but the initial press reports were confusing. Some papers reported it as if Miles had been involved in some kind of altercation, as if maybe he'd been the problem. Then the photographs appeared. Someone had taken pictures that night. Pictures of Miles bleeding, being shoved into the police car. Pictures of his face, the gash above his eye clearly visible. Pictures of the Birdland marquee with Miles Davis in huge letters and the police car directly beneath it. The photographs told a story the police report couldn't hide. Here was America's greatest jazz musician, beaten and bleeding, arrested in front of the club where he was the headliner, his name literally visible in the frame of the photograph showing his arrest. The photographs went everywhere. Front page of newspapers, jazz magazines, international press. Everyone saw them. And America had to confront something uncomfortable. If this could happen to Miles Davis, famous, successful, talented, at his own place of employment, what was happening to black men who weren't famous? The jazz community exploded. Dizzy Gillespie, Duke Ellington, everyone spoke out. This wasn't just about Miles. This was about how black musicians were treated in America. Despite their talent, despite their fame, despite their contributions to American culture, they were still seen as threats, still treated as criminals, still subject to violence from police who saw their skin before they saw their humanity. Miles was released the next day. The charges were eventually dropped. There were too many witnesses, too many photographs, too much evidence that the police had been in the wrong. But Miles's face told the story. The gash above his eye took weeks to heal. The scar would last forever. Every time Miles looked in the mirror for the rest of his life, he would see the mark left by that nightstick. The incident changed Miles. People who knew him said he became more distant, more distrustful, harder to reach. He'd always been private. But after Birdland, something shifted. In interviews, Miles talked about it. They beat me like I was some criminal, he said. My name was right there above their heads. Right there. And they didn't care. Or maybe they did care. Maybe that's why they hit me harder. He never went back to Birdland, the most famous jazz club in the world, the place where he'd had some of his greatest performances, and he never played there again. I can't walk into that club, he told a reporter years later, without seeing my own blood on that sidewalk. But the incident did something else too. It changed how America talked about jazz musicians. Before Birdland, jazz musicians, especially black jazz musicians, were often portrayed in the press as if they were characters from another world, romanticized, yes, but also othered, as if they weren't quite real people with real lives who deserved the same respect and protection as anyone else. After Birdland, that narrative was harder to maintain. The photographs of Miles bleeding on Broadway forced people to see jazz musicians as what they were, working professionals who deserved to be safe at their place of employment. The NAACP got involved. They called for an investigation into police treatment of black performers and black citizens in New York. The incident became a catalyst for larger conversations about police violence against Black Americans, conversations that, sadly, America is still having more than 60 years later. The officer who beat Miles was eventually reprimanded and suspended without pay, not fired, not arrested, not charged with assault, even though that's clearly what had occurred. Reprimanded and suspended. And that told its own story about justice in America. Miles rarely spoke about the incident after the first few years. It was too painful, too raw, too representative of everything he'd spent his life dealing with. But when young black musicians asked him for advice, he would sometimes tell them, "Your talent doesn't protect you. Your fame doesn't protect you. Your name in lights doesn't protect you. Nothing protects you, except knowing your worth regardless of how they treat you." In 1989, 30 years after the incident, a reporter asked Miles if he'd forgiven the officer who beat him. Miles looked at the reporter for a long time. "Forgive him? Man, you don't understand. It's not about forgiving one cop. It's about a system that makes a cop think he can beat a man standing in front of a sign with that man's name on it. How do you forgive a system?" The reporter didn't have an answer. Miles' scar from Birdland was still visible in that interview. 3 decades later, you could still see the mark above his eye where the nightstick had split the skin. When Miles died in 1991, obituaries and retrospectives mentioned the Birdland incident. It had become part of his story, part of how people understood both Miles and the era he lived in. Today, there's no plaque at the corner of Broadway and 52nd Street marking what happened there. Birdland moved locations years ago. The original building is gone, but the photographs remain. Miles Davis, bleeding, being shoved into a police car, his name in lights above the scene. Those photographs tell a story about America that's still true today, about how black excellence, black success, black achievement don't protect black bodies from violence, about how you can be the greatest musician of your generation, can have your name in lights, can be standing directly beneath that name, and still be beaten for having the audacity to exist in that space. Miles Davis made music that changed the world. Kind of Blue, Sketches of Spain, Bitches Brew, albums that revolutionized not just jazz but all of American music. But on August 25th, 1959, none of that mattered to a police officer who saw a black man and decided he needed to be moved along. The Birdland incident wasn't just about Miles Davis. It was about every black person in America who has ever been told they don't belong somewhere they have every right to be. It was about the distance between what America says it values, talent, achievement, success, and what it actually protects or fails to protect. And it was about a musician who refused to move, who stood his ground, who paid for that refusal with his blood and his freedom, and whose photograph, bleeding in front of his own name, became an image that America couldn't ignore. Subscribe for more stories about the moments that changed music history, about artists who stood their ground even when it cost them, and about the painful truths hiding behind the beautiful music. Because sometimes the most important thing about an artist isn't just what they created, it's what they survived.